Hi, this is the Average Human Being podcast, a podcast about noticing the small moments that shape us more than the big ones. I'm Darren Mell, Average Human Being. I'm not here to teach you anything, just talk about being human. Thanks for listening. Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Average Human Being podcast. I'm your host, Darren Mell. And this episode, I wanted to ask a question to everyone out there. When was the last time you truly saw yourself in someone else's story? This took a while for me. Like I said, I'm a Gen Xer in his late 50s. And I was doing a lot of work just trying to make ends meet in the early days. Like I got married in 1997 and was really just trying to find my footing in life and get 2 children raised. But over that, a lot of things were going on, swirling in my head that I didn't even know about. And I took a long time off where I really didn't read anything, and the only movies I saw were animated. I jokingly tell people that if you talk about a movie that came out from 2000 to about 2010, I was raising an infant and had a teenager in the house. So I was Gen Zing it and millennialing it. So if it wasn't animated, I probably didn't see it. But part of your ability, like as time goes by, to see yourself in others. You know, I mentioned several books that I've written here, and the first thing I want to say is that I'm a self-published author. I'm a nobody, and that's why I put average human being. Nobody knows who I am, and I'm okay with that. But what I do crave at this point in my life is feedback. Should I keep doing this? Should I keep writing? How can I get better? I want to get better, and I'm trying to establish community here with all of you. Don't be shy. I want to hear from you. Reach out to me on Substack, and I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much everywhere, just not on the mainstream social media sites. I stay away from those. But what I wanted to touch on in this episode is, some experiences don't make sense when you're young until one day you realize you become the person that you once couldn't imagine. And the first book that I wrote last year was based on the fact that for 10 years I led a BDR, SDR prospecting team at a large tech company for 10 years. And for that time period, I did nothing but hire recent college graduates. So my life for 10 years was hiring 22 to 26-year-olds primarily. And so I did over 500 interviews and hired over 100 during that time and built it from nothing to, it was a powerhouse, and I had a wonderful experience. But I realized that I had data on what good looks like. And so I wrote the book. And what I didn't realize when I was writing it as a guide for how to grow your career, and I used the data from what I saw, I realized it was telling my own story in a sort of a funny way because I didn't have the plans that I had. And one of the sections I titled it, I See You, Can You See Me? And it talks about when I was in my mid to late 20s working at a cardiac rehab / fitness center at a hospital in Florida. The majority of the people, picture me at that time, I still had a mullet. This was like 1993 to 97. And when I was working there, most of the people were going through 12 weeks of reconditioning. The biggest thing is they survived the heart attack. And most of them were going through some sort of cardiac event. They were senior citizens for the most part. And they would come in and they would do 12 weeks of monitored exercise where you're hooking them up to the EKG to make sure that their heart is performing properly and that they're healing. Family of history of heart disease was usually the main reason they had conditions that put them in the program. However, there were always a couple people in the program who were in their late 30s to early 40s. And the reason that they were having a heart attack was due to lifestyle choices. They told me that they had high-stress jobs in sales, which I would eventually land, and they didn't exercise and had a poor diet. And they were going after the money. A lot of them were financial traders, very, very high stress jobs. Surviving a cardiac event, if you haven't been through one, it's like your heart's been in a car accident. It's never the same. And it's good news that they survived it, but your heart, just like a car, is never as strong as it was before you had the event. And that scared the hell out of me. As I transitioned out of that role into the sales world, to make more money and provide for my family, I always made sure to do the best to take care of my health. And I'm not a fanatic. I'm a 2 to 3 days a week exercise person. Like at this point in my life, I just want to stay alive and not have to buy new clothes. But that was pivotal in that I couldn't see. I remember when my dad turned 50, went with him to his office that day. He was an accountant, and they had black balloons, a black cake, and I was like, they were like talking about him like that his life was almost over at 50, and I've already passed that, and I'm like, and it felt like to me that that was a million miles away. And I'm not a health nut, but I've made sure over the years to maintain a decent health, and it's paid off. I think for the most part, I feel pretty good. I've got the normal aches and pains that time reminds you of the stupid things you did when you were younger. But being comfortable financially is only one part of it. And most people say if you don't have your health, you don't have nothing. So what my point here is that every personal experience and interaction can stay with you forever. When I started working after college, I couldn't see myself in those patients, as I never thought about even getting to that age, but I see myself in them now. And I feel like we're all a work in progress. And when I think back when I started the role at the tech company, they hired me to hire recent college grads and train them into sales. A lot of people don't understand. They saw me when I was interviewing them. I'm like, oh, look at him. He's got this big job and everything. But working alongside people half your age, sometimes you feel like you don't even speak the same language. I was scared. But the team that I hired, they treated me with respect, and it was a wonderful experience. And I've made some great friendships during that time. And it was so fantastic to watch these people grow their careers. Being that most of my books have so much ties to empathy, gratitude, and perspective, I couldn't write any sort of a book for anybody that was merely instructional to growing career, just like do this, do that. There's way more than just painting by numbers. Being able to see yourself in other people, no matter what their age is a way that we can all connect to each other. So I see you out there. I see all of you out there in the working world. And, also too, over time, I've noticed when I asked you the question about who do you see, yourself in over time, comfort and success don't mean much if you can't move through your life to enjoy them. I honestly believe that being able to see yourself in other people, regardless of your age or stage, is really how we stay human. And for myself and the reading that I do, I've not been able to read for pleasure as much as like I read for purpose. And I seem to be drawn to people, for me, that I see something in them that I don't think that I'm that good at and want to improve upon. So I always liked Jimmy Carter and Fred Rogers, also known as Mr. Rogers. And I've told people this before. In the world of sales and being busy and everything, sometimes it's hard to slow down and really listen to people. And I'm guilty of it because you're in a pay for performance world. And the more you do, the more you make. And so you just keep moving. But they had so many books written about them by other people who were so impacted by them. And it was a common theme. I always felt when I was speaking with Fred Rogers or Jimmy Carter that there was no one else that they were paying attention to. There was nothing more important to them in that current moment than the conversation they were having with me. And so I read books about those type of people because I want to be better in that respect and get better at listening and comprehending and truly hearing people. So a couple of questions as we close out this episode. And like I said, I'd love to hear from you and build community around this average human being world, because I think we're going to need each other. Who do you see differently now than you did earlier in life? Think about time and maybe somebody that looks different to you now. And what's one lesson, experience, or experience that taught you that school never could? Like something that you didn't learn in school, but it stuck with you and you learned it that way. And I'll end with this. If we can learn to see ourselves in each other, work gets easier, life gets richer, and none of us have to figure it out alone. And that is today's episode. I'm Darren Mel, Average Human Being. Thanks for listening. This has been the Average Human Being podcast with Darren Mel. Thanks for listening.